October 7, 2023 was the deadliest day in the history of Israel when hundreds of Hamas terrorists launched a surprise attack breaching heavily fortified Gaza border to enter Jewish towns and cities and killing hundreds of people. At last count, at least 1,200 Israeli civilians were killed and over 200 were taken hostage by Hamas. They were taken back into the Gaza Strip. As of today, even now, a year into this terrible, terrible tragedy, this terrible war that's been unleashed by that terror attack on the 7th of October 2023, 1 year on, close to 100 of those hostages are still in Hamas custody. Israel has vowed to bring back those who are still in Hamas captivity, but the cost of war is very, very costly. Israel has been accused of using disproportionate force in response to the terror attack. In Gaza alone, more than 40,000 people, mainly women and children, have died. The tiny enclave, which is 200 kilometers up and down, has bled profusely in the last 1 year. But Israel has said it is not going to back down from a fight. And now, more importantly, this is not just the only front in which Israel is fighting. Just in the last month, it has opened a second front, which is in the north of Israel. It has attacked Hezbollah. It has attacked the leaders and commanders of Hezbollah and killed the leader of Hezbollah for the last 30 years, Hassan Nasrallah. And now there is a ground invasion in southern Lebanon. And if all of this weren't bad enough, there is now the very real possibility of the first ever direct confrontation between Iran and Israel.
Gunshots, rockets, screams and blood. The horrifying morning of October 7, 2023 will forever haunt the nation of Israel. Armed Hamas militants bulldoze their way into Israel to take revenge for undergoing almost 16 years of relentless Israeli aggression. It's been 1 year since the October 7th massacre. But how did an amateur militant group terrorize a country with one of the world's strongest defense systems?
On October 7th,
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 I was shot 12 times in my body. In my 2 legs, in my hip, left hand and shoulder were all hit.
4 members of my family were murdered and 7 others were kidnapped.
we run into Be'eri. The first thing I see is 3 young kids killed at the gate.
As rockets soared towards Israeli cities, the sound of sirens pierced the air, signaling the gravity of the situation. Hamas fired hundreds of missiles at the enemy nation, hoping to overwhelm its Iron Dome defense system. Hamas launched meticulously coordinated attacks, including ground incursions into southern Israel. The unprepared, fear-filled Israelis scrambled for shelter as explosions rocked neighborhoods, leading to chaos and panic. In the southern region, particularly around kibbutz communities near the Gaza border, Hamas militants infiltrated homes, leading to scenes of horror and violence. Many residents were caught off guard as gunmen entered their houses, resulting in brutal killings and taking of hostages. Several Israelis witnessed family members being slaughtered right before their eyes. Hamas mercilessly fired even at frightened kids. Israel's kibbutz witnessed one of the bloodiest killing sprees as Hamas gunmen murdered more than 100 people and kidnapped 30. One of the most tragic episodes occurred at the Noah Music Festival, where attendees were celebrating when the attack commenced. The festival goers were unaware of the situation on ground, and the rockets seen in the sky were not taken seriously. Within no time, fear engulfed the music festival as gunshots sounded. The youngsters ran to take shelter, but several were gunned down and desperate cries for help went unheard. Hamas cheered and rallied bodies as Israelis were in despair. Several people were taken hostage at the Noah Music Festival. Homes were burned to ashes and streets filled with bodies as Hamas raided Israel. As 1,200 people were killed and 251 taken hostage, October 7th will go down as Israel's worst terror attack. As the dust settled, the ramifications of October 7th became starkly apparent. In the hours following the attack, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation, denouncing the assault as a cowardly act of terrorism. Netanyahu declared a state of war, vowing to respond with overwhelming force.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה. לא במבצע, לא בסבבים, במלחמה.
He urged unity among Israelis, calling for resilience in the face of the onslaught. Following this, the Israeli military launched extensive strikes targeting Hamas infrastructure in Gaza, including command centers and weapon storage sites. The cycle of violence spiraled out of control, with both sides engaged in retaliatory strikes. This led to the start of the war in Gaza. October 7, 2023 marked a critical turning point in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It highlighted the need for an immediate solution between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
It's been exactly a year to the day since the October 7th terror strikes by Hamas, particularly in southern Israel. Over 1,200 Israelis were killed, over 240 were taken as hostage. And in response, for the last year, Israel has done a massive military operation against Hamas in Gaza, in which more than 40,000 Palestinians, a large number of them, women and children, have died. Now, there is a new front that has opened in the north with Hezbollah, in which over 1,000 Lebanese nationals have died. And now, most importantly, there is the possibility of a first ever direct confrontation between Iran and Israel. This particularly after last Tuesday's barrage of rocket and ballistic missiles that we saw, close to 200 of them being unleashed on Israel. Israel has said, and no less than the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said that it reserves the right to retaliate, and that retaliation will be deep, painful, and will send out a signal to Iran. Are we now on the brink of an irreversible course of events? Are we looking at a full-blown confrontation between Iran and Israel, something which we've not been accustomed to or used to or have seen ever before? Joining me now to try and get an Iranian perspective on the last 1 year and what the future might hold, because everyone is worried about the immediate future, is His Excellency Iraj Elahi. He's the Iranian ambassador to India. Thank you very much, Ambassador Elahi, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. I want to first start off by asking you your thoughts on a day like today, October 7th. It is 1 year since the Hamas terror strikes. Like I said, over 1,000 Israelis were killed. And in response, in Israel's military operations, over 40,000 Palestinians have been killed. What are your thoughts on a day like today?
First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to clarify what happened and what's going on in the current situation in the region. 1 year back, Hamas, as a resistance group, conducted an operation against Israel. You know, unfortunately, during this year, we witnessed that there is a try, an organized try to tag this as a terrorist act. You know, in fact, the roots of this operation, this act, this event goes back to the history of Palestine, history of Israel, history of the hostility between Israel and Palestinian. So first of all, I should mention and emphasize that we believe that Palestinian and Hamas, as a Palestinian group, as a resistance group, had no option just to defend their homeland, their people. So we should distinguish, we should recognize is as an resistance operation, not a terrorist act. This is what we differs in our definition. It differs from many other countries and many people. You know, unfortunately, even if we assume that it was a terrorist act, which was not, the reaction of Israel during last year was not proportionate to the casualties of Israeli. You know, more than 41,000 people have been killed. There were children, fathers, mothers, sisters, grandchildren. You know, and nowadays we are witnessing that the Palestinians are suffering from starvation.
Okay.
Even UNRWA, as a UN agency, cannot carry out its duty and responsibility to carry foods to Palestinians. So even if we assume 7th of October as a terrorist act, the reaction and retaliation of Israel to this was not proportionate to the casualty and this.
So, Ambassador Elahi, now the concern is that, especially after what we saw last Tuesday, the barrage of rocket attacks, missile attacks from Iran into Israel, Israel is saying it will retaliate, it reserves the right to retaliate, and the entire world is concerned whether this will lead to a complete flare-up, a full-fledged war between your country and Israel. How would you address those concerns?
Yeah, it's a real concern and appropriate concern. You know, since the escalation of the situation is not on the benefit of Iran, on the benefit of Israel, on the benefit of region, on the benefit of whole and global economy. But we should not forget that this was Israel that started this unfortunate game. We should blame Israel. Israel violated Iranian sovereignty through assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in the capital of Iran, in Tehran, and also before that, it assassinated our scientists, nuclear scientists, our different scientists. So the Israel should be blamed, and we hope that Israel has learned more enough from the barrage of missiles of Iran, that Iran is capable to retaliate once again, and we will deploy our new generation, our ammunition. So it would be on the benefit of Israel to not enter an unfortunate circle of escalation.
Ambassador, you know, you mentioned the killing of Ismail Haniyeh. Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, was also killed in an Israeli airstrike on the 27th of September. None of these were direct attacks on Iranian soil by Israel, like the kind that we saw Iran do to Israel, 200 rockets almost last Tuesday. So Israel says, and the Israeli ambassador was here in the studios last week, he says any country, any sovereign country will have no choice but to respond to such a direct attack. How do you respond to that?
You know, Israel assassinated Hamas in our territory. We consider assassination of Ismail Haniyeh a violation on our sovereignty. So it doesn't make any difference for Iran. We consider it as an attack to the sovereignty of Iran, and we, according to our inherent rights for self-defense and United Nations Charter, we have the right to retaliate. So the missile barrage of missile, or this launching a missile against Israel was legal, legitimate, and according to self-defense, which was mentioned in the United Nations Charter.
But Ambassador, now the concern is that Israel may target Iran's nuclear facilities or its oil facilities. In fact, the Israeli Prime Minister also put out a video before the attack that happened last week, speaking to the Iranian people and saying that the regime, the Iranian regime, must be removed. How would you respond to that? The concerns that your economy, which is already not in very great shape, could get further destabilized if there were to be a direct Israeli attack in retaliation for what happened last week.
Yeah. Your question has three parts. First of all, we have taken precautionary measures regarding our nuclear facility, nuclear installation, so there is no concern. And besides this, most of our nuclear installations are underground and even under mountains. So no bomb, no ammunition can affect them. So there is no concern regarding the nuclear facilities. Your second part regarding the difficulties or problems of Iranian economy, I should say that this is based on miscalculation of Israel and its ally, that because of the economic brutal and terrorist act of United States, which imposed a unilateral sanction against Iran, Iranian economy has become weak and is suffering. You know, we have shown that the progress, economic progress of Iran and Iranian achievement in different fields of science and technology, and you know, development in different fields of economy have proven that Iranian economy is resilient, and we do not have any concern regarding the escalation of the issue. The third part of your question regarding the regime change, I hope that we will witness a regime change inside Israel, because fortunately recently, after the escalation of the tension between Hamas and Israel, there are too many demonstrations. Israeli people are marching in the street and shouting against Netanyahu, and for this reason I can say that Netanyahu himself has hijacked Israel security of the people, security of the region, and even its allies for himself too, because he has charged for different crimes.
I do want to ask you, Ambassador, do you see any role that India and the Indian government can play in trying to stabilize the Middle East? India has had traditionally good ties with both Tehran and with Tel Aviv. Would you call upon the Indian government to use its good offices to try and restore some degree of peace and stability in the Middle East? Is there anything India or the government of India can do?
India is an important country, not only in the region and in Asia, but at the global level. And it's emerging as a new economic power in the world. It has a good relation with Israel. Besides this, it is a founder of NAM, Non-Aligned Movement, and it claims that it has become or tried to become voice of South. My question is that how how a human being, not only Indian, how a human being can be silent regarding killing of people when, according to the Hinduism, even people are respecting plants, animals, and everything. Any creature is respected. How can be indifferent? People can be indifferent regarding the massacre which is going on in Palestine. We believe that India could have role and can play important role to convincing Israel to stop genocide in Gaza and to go forward to not escalate the tension and situation in the region.
All right, and one final word from you, Ambassador. Have you had any conversations with the Indian government regarding this? India also has a broader worry, a broader concern. Obviously, if there were to be some kind of war between Israel and Iran, That will definitely affect the stability of the world. It will affect oil prices. India, as you know, imports 70% of its oil. It used to import a lot more oil from Iran before the sanctions kicked in. How would you speak to those broader concerns as well, that as India moves closer to Israel and some of the Gulf Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Bahrain, etc., that Iran is moving closer to countries like China or Russia? How would you address that concern?
You know, India is an old friend of Iran. For not century but millennium, India and Iran have been together. You know, chartering or putting Iran, Russia, China in one side and India and other countries in another side, in my belief, is not correct. Our relation with India is very close. We recently signed a long-term contract regarding Chabahar. Of course, our economic relation was affected by the sanction. But India is an emerging economy, needs energy. We are a reliable partner. We have been a reliable partner, and we are reliable. And we can assure energy security of India, which is a main concern of India. So we hope that we will restart our cooperation in the field of energy.
All right. Ambassador Iraj Elahi, the Honorable Iranian Ambassador to India, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. Even today, a year on, over 100 hostages are still in Hamas captivity. In response, Israel launched a massive operation against Hamas. It has pummeled Hamas's military capabilities down to the ground. More than 40,000 Palestinians have died, a large number of them women and children. Israel has got a lot of criticism from the Western world for that. But now, just as you thought that Hamas's military capabilities have been destroyed and that Hamas will not be able to launch another October 7 style attack, Israel has opened another front, this time in the north, vis-a-vis Lebanon and Hezbollah. It started 3 weeks ago with the dramatic pager attacks which targeted specifically Hezbollah commanders, and then culminated with the dramatic killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah chief, who's been Hezbollah chief for the last 30 years. He was killed in a dramatic airstrike in Beirut on the 27th of September. And now there is a ground invasion by Israeli troops into Lebanon. But the most important and the most critical and perhaps the most dangerous precipice is right now, especially after last week's barrage of rocket attacks by Iran into Israel, the first ever direct confrontation between Tehran and Tel Aviv. Now the world, and in particular Iran, is bracing itself for Israel's response. What might that response be? And how does one guard against both countries not climbing the escalation ladder? Whatever that response might be by Israel, how do both countries ensure that things are brought back from the precipice? I'm now joined by a very special guest, Mr. Ehud Olmert. He's the former Prime Minister of Israel. Thank you very much. First of all, our thoughts and prayers, Mr. Olmert, with the hundreds who died, in fact, the thousands who died, and also the families of the hostages who are still fighting for the release of their loved ones. I want to first start off by asking you, it's exactly a year to the day since the October 7th terrorist strikes by Hamas and then subsequently Israel's response to it. What has been achieved in this last 1 year? 40,000 Palestinians have died, most of them women and children. Hamas's capability, we believe, to carry out another October 7 style attack has been greatly diminished. But what has Israel achieved, and what really is the end game here? Because it's been a year now. This is easily one of the longest military operations that Israel has undertaken against Hamas and in the Gaza Strip.
I think that by and large we can say that we have achieved our goals. What I think were supposed to be our goals, as far as Hamas is concerned. We have been very aggressive against We killed thousands of Hamas fighters. We destroyed a major part of the tunnels underground Gaza. We destroyed their rockets. They almost are left with no rockets, with no missiles that can be shot against Israel. And we have created the foundations for what perhaps can become the rebuilding of Gaza on an entirely different basis without terrorist organizations' dominance in Gaza. Did we kill all of the Hamas fighters? No, it's impossible. Did we kill all of the leaders? I'm not certain. I don't think that we did. I think that Yahya Sinwar perhaps is still alive. But they have been weakened dramatically, and they are in no position to pose the same threat to the state of Israel as they could last year. So in this, and the only problem that we have is that we never recovered back all of the hostages. And I think that therefore we have to decide to stop now the war and to reach an agreement that will allow us to bring back all the hostages which are still held by the Hamas.
But I do want to ask you, just as this one front against Hamas and this operation which started on the 7th of October is still continuing, it's 1 year on, Israel has now opened a second front in the north vis-a-vis Hezbollah. It's attacked Lebanon. It started with the pager attacks a few weeks back and then culminated in Hassan Nasrallah's dramatic assassination with the airstrikes. And then now there is a limited ground operation. This was not the objective. The resettling of northern Israeli citizens was never the objective when the war against Hamas started on October 7th last year. So how would you speak to those specific concerns? And also, what are the chances that Israel will get bogged down in a long, drawn-out ground operation in Lebanon against Hezbollah, much like what happened more than 10 years ago, or close to 10 years ago, in 2006, which is the last time Israel went into southern Lebanon?
Will you agree if I will somehow amend your question? You say that a new front was opened. My friend, the front in the north was opened on the 8th of October last year, a day after the 7th of October in the south, because of the brutal attack by Hezbollah against the state of Israel right away. They didn't wait more than 24 hours before they started their attack against the state of Israel, forcing 80,000 Israelis that live in the north out of their homes and away for almost all this year. So this is not a new front. This is an old front. It is just as a result of the achievements in the south. Israel decided now to address itself in a more focused manner to the front in the north. And I think that we have done very well. We have targeted most of the leadership of Hezbollah, not just Nasrallah, but all of the other senior commanders of the Hezbollah were targeted by Israel. So the Hezbollah was weakened dramatically. And we also destroyed many of their hangars and their command positions and the rockets and the missiles which were accumulated by them in order to be used against the state of Israel. However, I'm not in particular love with a major Israeli ground operation in Lebanon. I think that we need to find a way to reach an agreement on the basis of the initiatives of the Americans and the French that will bring an end to the war in the north.
So, so you have the war in the south, which is completing a year today. You have the war in the north. So 2 active fronts at the moment. And now there's a third one, Prime Minister, which is, and we are, frankly, in uncharted terrain. We're in uncharted waters here. the first ever direct attack between Iran and Israel, especially after what we saw last Tuesday, the barrage of rocket attacks, almost 200 rockets and ballistic missiles being fired directly into Israel. The Israeli ambassador spoke to me last week and he said Israel, like any other country, reserves the right to retaliate. So the retaliation will come. It's a question of when and not if. But how would you speak to concerns that the entire global community has that if Israel were to retaliate, and we know that the nature of that retaliation will be widespread, the damage will be pretty substantial, how would you speak to concerns that the global community has that this could escalate into a wider regional war and that we could pretty much, this entire region and as a consequence the entire world could be blown up if this is going to end up in a direct Tehran versus Tel Aviv war?
Well, you say that there is a danger that a war between Israel and Iran will erupt. It already takes place. Listen, Iran attacked Israel twice with ballistic missiles. I don't know that there was any such major ballistic missile attack in the modern history by one country against the other. Do you know of any similar? 200 ballistic missiles were shot from Iran against the state of Israel last Tuesday. Is this not a war which was declared, which was actually activated by Iran against Israel anyway? So the question now is, what will be the Israeli response? The Israeli response has to be firm and serious and painful. However, I can't ignore that in the two attacks of Iran, we, together with the very significant assistance by America and Great Britain and France and some Arab countries, we intercepted all of the missiles, or the missiles which were not intercepted didn't cause any damage in terms of human life. So I think that we have proved to the Iranians that all the weapons that they have are unable to cause the damage that they were anticipating and that they were planning against Israel. And therefore, we can afford to react in such a way that will be painful, that will be damaging, but that will not necessitate the kind of reaction by Iran which will push all this into a comprehensive all-out war. So I am in favor of an Israeli reaction. It's inevitable. It's unavoidable. The Iranians attacked Israel with 200 ballistic missiles. It can't be left unanswered.
Okay.
But I hope that we will be able to answer in a way that will both be painful, but that will not necessitate a counter-reaction that may bring down all this region into a comprehensive war.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert of Israel, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. And once again, like I said, our thoughts, prayers with the victims of the October 7th attacks and, of course, also the families of those hostages who are still held by Hamas. All right, so you've heard the view from Israel, you've heard the view from Iran, but what's the view from the United States? Today is October 7th. There's going to be a lot of memorials, commemorations of what happened on October 7th exactly a year ago in the Hamas terror strikes in which over 1,200 Israelis were killed and over 200 abducted and kept as hostage. There will also be a lot of protests, marches across the United States and indeed other Western capitals for what Israel has done in response, and that has led to the deaths of more than 40,000 Palestinian people. All right, let's now go across to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who is a professor with the Columbia University and also director at the Center for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much, Professor Sachs. First thoughts on October 7th. What is the view from America, particularly because it comes at a pretty sensitive time. We're 3 weeks out from an all-important election. It's arguably, many are saying, the closest election in a generation. How will October 7th and the actions of Israel over the last year, and perhaps more importantly, its actions from here on out, how is it being played out and how is it being viewed in the United States?
Well, the situation in the U.S. is complicated. I think most Americans are very distressed by the war. Young people in particular are very much against what Israel has been doing. There have been protests across the campuses of the United States, including my own campus in New York City at Columbia University. The political class, by and large, has backed Israel almost unconditionally, but this is the powerful Israel lobby at play, meaning that the pro-Israeli faction gives vast campaign contributions to American congressmen and presidential candidates, and they tend to fall squarely into the U.S. line. So I think there's a quite big divide right now between the American public opinion, which is not happy at all with Israel's extreme violence, does not want America to be dragged into a wider war, with the U.S. political class, which basically gives a carte blanche to Israel, and the security state, which always has a key role, probably is also a bit divided. There are hardliners that want a wider war, that want to fight Iran. There are many, I think probably in the Pentagon, that want to stay out of a Middle East war. The president himself is a lame duck and also very weak, physically weak. This is the end of his political life as well as the end of his administration. And so we're adrift in actual policy. We hardly hear two coherent sentences at a time from the leadership in the United States, but the U.S. continues to fund and arm Israel pretty much to the maximum, and Israel is using that, especially Netanyahu, who is a very cynical, forceful character, to use the U.S. At this period of maximal sway of Israel before a new president arrives.
I do want to ask you, because you referenced your first answer saying that, irrespective of party affiliations, there seems to be almost a carte blanche given to Israel. Do you see any difference at all between Harris and Trump, and depending on whoever becomes president post-January, the policy towards Israel might change, or is it pretty much the same, irrespective of whether a Democrat is in the White House or a Republican is?
On the issue of Israel, in the campaign, they're competing with each other to say who is more pro-Israel and who is more anti-Iran. That's American politics. They're out for their campaign donors, who are big bucks and really demand complete obeisance, I would say, to the Israeli line. So we don't hear a word of difference between the two. Actually, it's a little hard to guess. I don't even want to guess whether afterwards would make much of a difference. What is true, though, and I think it's important, the American deep state, by that I mean the CIA, the Pentagon, the State Department, the military industry, must be seeing that this approach, this unconditional support for an extremely violent Israeli reaction isn't working. It's not bringing any solution. It's not bringing peace. It's not bringing security, nor is it bringing the United States allies. Nor was the idea that the U.S. had, I always thought it was delusional, but they believed in it, that they would be able to engineer a normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia without a Palestinian state. That's what they wanted to do, both the Trump and Biden. That's also gone. The Saudis are very clear. No normalization without a state of Palestine. So in this sense, the deep state needs a different strategy. And that could be true no matter, again, who is president on January 20th.
I do want to ask you, the big concern now is what happens if there's a direct retaliation by Israel at Iran for what Iran did last Tuesday when there was this barrage of rockets, over 150 of them, which targeted main Israeli cities, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, even though the damage from it was quite limited. Israel says it reserves the right to retaliate and that it will retaliate, and it will be a painful one. How worried are you that this is now inevitably climbing the escalatory ladder, or do you reckon that as and when the Israeli response happens, it may be such that it assuages whatever domestic concerns there may be in Israel, but at the same time, there isn't an incentive for Iran to retaliate again?
We have to say, first of all, just to be clear, I'm sure everybody is clear on this point, this is not Israel retaliating to Iran. Iran retaliated to Israel. Israel might say, well, that was a retaliation to Iran. Iran would say, well, that was a retaliation to Israel. This is a conflict that goes back decades. And the solution to this conflict is a state of Palestine alongside a state of Israel. Until that happens, there can be no peace. And nobody can say, oh, it's just Israel protecting itself. The problem with Israel's position is that it denies a state of Palestine, which is required by international law, that Israel leave the occupied territories. But Israel wants all control. So in this sense, my own view is that Israel is the basic blockade of peace, no matter which week one attributes the retaliation to whom. And until there is a two-state solution, which the whole world agrees on other than Israel, and which the U.S. effectively blocks through its veto in the UN Security Council, until that happens, there will be no peace. There will be escalation. Definitely Netanyahu wants escalation. He wants to pull the U.S. into a massive war on Iran for many reasons, because Iran is a threat to Israel. Iran is close to a nuclear weapon, or maybe even already has one, who knows. But in any event, Netanyahu wants a war with Iran and wants to drag the U.S. into a war. This is mind-bogglingly dangerous and wrong. And diplomats everywhere should be telling the United States, stop Israel from doing this. This is what the job of a president is, to stop all these enthusiastic small states from using America's $1 trillion a year military for their particular political agenda. Israel is manipulating U.S. policy right now. This is not the U.S. manipulating Israel, it's Israel manipulating the U.S. through its powerful lobby. It's very dangerous for the whole world. If we had a functioning president, the president would stop this. It's very clear.
And I want to get a final word on how you see this playing itself out over the next 3 months and beyond. On the one hand, like you said, this presidency is pretty much a lame duck. They don't have the power or the or whether it's persuasion or even monies to try and stop Netanyahu from doing what he's doing. So you don't see that changing in the next 3 months. And whoever is the next president, both Trump and Harris, you say there won't be much of a change of policy, but neither of them, whoever the new president is, has an incentive in getting directly sucked into a war between Israel and Iran. So how do you see this sort of, what's the off-ramp here, and by when do you see the off-ramp happening?
Let me just be clear. The U.S., of course, has the leverage. It could stop Israel in its tracks by saying to Israel today, we are not going to arm and fund you in your continued war. Israel would have to stop. Many presidents have done that in the past, by the way. That's how it really works. Biden may be mentally too far gone, politically too far gone, doesn't believe in it. Who knows? What's also true is Blinken, the Secretary of State, is an arch-Zionist in his position, and so he doesn't believe in it. But if they wanted to stop, the leverage is certainly there. What I do believe is that what's happening right now in the Middle East is not only a a gross violation of humanitarian law and international law of many kinds, and there now are endless rulings and declarations of the UN to that effect. But this is a great danger to the whole world. It's another entry point into a World War III, because if there is a war on Iran, Russia will come in. We'll have another front of a confrontation between two nuclear superpowers. It's extreme, and with Israel being a nuclear power, it's extremely dangerous. So what is really needed is that the major states, India, China, Russia, Britain, France, the European Union, the non-aligned states, everybody should be saying to the United States, get this under control. It's within your power. Stop this escalation for the sake of the entire world. That's the message that has to go to the U.S.
Right.
It would be heard.
All right. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, as always, a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank